Whoa, I was hardly ready to start. Section 10.3b. Let's talk about 10.3b. Again, it's still operations with radical expressions, only today we're going to do a little bit of multiplying. So we're going to multiply binomial expressions. This is going to feel like what we did with variables. So when we multiply radical expressions, if you look at the bottom half of the page, you'll see a bunch of examples. The first thing you're going to have to do is use distributive property or the FOIL method or the line method, whatever you called it, but where we multiply everything by everything else. You're going to multiply, remember, coefficients and radicands separately. Outside the radical stuff gets multiplied, under the radical stuff gets multiplied. And your last step is to check all the terms and simplify. I feel pretty confident in saying you will need to do some simplifying somewhere along the way. So let's do a couple examples. This will be short and sweet for everybody. Let's do example B, 1B. I don't know why I lettered these. So do I have to FOIL or am I just looking at distributive property? This square root of 6 is sitting out in front of the parentheses, right? So this is the thing that gets multiplied by everything inside the parentheses. So what is a square root of 6 times 3? Well, they're both separate. The 6 is under the radical, the 3 is not. So 3 square roots of 6. Always write the number first, the radical second, because then we don't get confused what is under and what isn't. The second thing I'm going to do is a square root of 6 times a square root of 2. Well, those guys are both underneath the square root sign, so my new radicand will be the answer to 6 times 2, or 12. I've got a plus sign here in the middle, so I keep a plus sign here in the middle. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all terms to see if I can simplify. Can 3 square roots of 6 be simplified? Remember, I don't care about the 3, I only care about breaking down the 6. Nothing there. I'll scooch that down a little. Can a square root of 12 be simplified? Aha, it can, right? Because 12 is 4 times 3. 4 is a perfect square. 3 gets stuck on there because we can't take it out of the radical. The plus sign stays in between. So 3 square roots of 6 plus 2 square roots of 3. Let's do problem D. The square root of 3 minus the square root of 5 to the second power. Remember what this second power tells me? That I've got 2 of these guys. So write it out 2 times. And now, do you see FOIL method or the lines? We're going to have to multiply everything by everything else. So if you're having a hard time seeing it, this square root of 3 is my first term. So a square root of 3 times a square root of 3 would be a square root of 9. A square root of 3 times a negative square root of 5. I'm going to always put my sign, my coefficient, and my radicand. So it's a negative, no coefficient, square root of 15. Now I'm going to switch over here to this negative square root of 5. Make sure you remember the sign on there. So I'm going to do a negative square root of 5 times the square root of 3. So that would be a negative, no numbers. New radicand will be 5 times 3, or 15. And negative square root of 5 times negative square root of 5. Well, negative times negative gives me a positive. No numbers. My radicand will be 5 times 5, or 25. So now I got to look to see if there's anything I can break down. I see 3 things we can do. Anybody catching the square root of 9? We know that's a perfect square, right? Square root of 9 is 3. Anybody catching the square root of 25 down here as well? Might as well take care of that while we're at it, right? So we know we've got a plus 5. And then I've got a negative square root of 15 minus a square root of 15. Well, if I gave you a negative x minus x, first of all, I'd ask you how many x's are there? There's a 1 if there's no sign. What's a negative 1x minus a negative 1x? Negative 2x. So what's a negative 1 square root of 15 minus 1 square root of 15? negative 2 square roots of 15. My last set of like terms I can combine. I could do a 3 plus a 5. So my final answer will be 8 minus those 2 square roots of 15. That middle term, those two middle terms are a little bit tricky. Watch out for those. Remember, there's always a 1 out in front. If you need to think of it in variable terms before you think of it as radicands, go ahead and do that. And let's do E. So I've got 5 square roots of 3 minus 6 is one binomial. 5 square roots of 3 plus 6 is the other binomial. 5 square roots of 3 is the first term that I'm going to multiply by everything in the other radical. So 5 square roots of 3 times 5 square roots of 3. Remember, multiply, put the sign if you need to, multiply the numbers, new radicand. So 5 times 5 is 25. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is a square root of 9. 5 square roots of 3 times 6, well, it's going to be positive. The numbers give me 5 times 6, give me a 30 with a square root of 3. Then I'm going to move over here to this negative 6 and times that by everything in the other parenthesis. So negative 6 times 5 square roots of 3, it'll be a negative 30 with a square root of 3. And negative 6 times 6 will be negative 36 if I did my math right. What do you see as far as combining, simplifying, like terms, anything? I'd be willing to bet that a lot of people notice those two middle terms. What do you see about the signs on our 30 square roots of 3? One's positive, right? 30 square roots of 3 minus 30 square roots of 3. What happens to those two? Those square roots of 3 go away completely. What else do you see that we can simplify? Square root of 9, right? That's 3. What am I going to do with this 3 that I just got and the 25 that I already had out in front? Multiply those to get a 75. Bring down the minus 36. Go to your calculator if you need to, but I'm going to say that my final answer for this one is 39 if I did my subtracting right. That was nice. We got just a plain old number on that one. So this is really practice with multiplying, which we did in section 10.2b, I think. Practice with combining like terms, which we did in 10.3a, and then just putting all of that together. So, question for you, explain in detail, in words, how to multiply radicals. So I gave you an example, 4 square roots of 3 and a negative 3 square roots of 6. Notice that's not a binomial. I just want to multiply, and this is really from section 10.2b. 4 square roots of 3 times a negative 3 square root of 6, what would you do? How do you multiply numbers that aren't under a radical? What do you do with radicands? And your practice problem, do that math problem. 2 plus the square root of 3 multiplied by 2 minus the square root of 3. I would be willing to bet, if you listen hard and watch closely, you're going to get a plain old number, no radicals left in your answer. Have a great day. We'll see you for the next one, 10.3c.